Dive into the world of true crime, and it's likely you'll come across the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list at least once or twice. And even if you haven't, most of us can get an understanding of what it is by just the name alone. And don't worry, if you're part of the group that's never looked at this list, we'll be taking a brief look at who's on it at the time of this recording. But first, I'd like to welcome you to Armchair Investigator. I'm Brooke, and it's so good to have you here. In this video, I'll be going over the history of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. I promise you it's quite fascinating, so be prepared to walk away knowing more than you thought possible about the subject. Should I include a test at the end? I think so. For the sake of simplicity, from here on out, I'll be referring to the 10 most wanted fugitives list as just the list. The FBI has been officially maintaining the list for over 70 years. It's actually quite fascinating how it came to fruition. They started publishing it on March 14, 1950, after a reporter asked the Bureau for the names and descriptions of the toughest guys the Bureau would like to capture. The reporter's question would spark so much interest and publicity that the FBI director at the time, J. Edgar Hoover, created the 10 Most Wanted Fugitives program. The FBI knew they needed help tracking and locating fugitives. By definition, a fugitive is a person involved in a criminal case who tries to elude law enforcement. So in March of 1950, the FBI, with the help of the nation's news media, established a program designed to spotlight dangerous fugitives nationwide and publicize their crimes. The program proved helpful. 162 of the 10 most wanted fugitive apprehensions have been the result of everyday citizens just like you and I who recognize fugitives from the list. There is certain criteria that must be met in order to make the top 10 list. First, the individual must have a lengthy record of committing serious crimes and or be considered a particularly dangerous menace to society due to current criminal charges. Second, it must be believed that the nationwide publicity from the program could actually aid in apprehending the fugitive, who in turn should not already be notorious due to other publicity. Interesting, right? At FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., there's a department called the Criminal Investigative Division, aka the CID, who work with 56 field offices located throughout the United States and Puerto Rico. These field offices submit candidates for the list, and nominees get reviewed by special agents in the CID. Wait, hold up, I'm sorry. When I think of the word nominee, I immediately think of a pageant. Anyway, FBI executive management ultimately gets final approval on who makes the list. Those on the list are not ranked. Now, I would have thought that to be the exact opposite, that those on the list are listed from the most dangerous to the least dangerous, but that's actually not the case. Now, fugitives are only removed from the list when they meet one of three conditions. So first being that they're captured. Second, the federal process pending against the individual is dismissed. Now, this is not an FBI decision, so I'm assuming this has something to do with the courts. Third, they no longer fit 10 most wanted fugitives criteria. Do they take that to heart? In the 11 cases where fugitives were removed for no longer fitting the criteria, it was determined that the fugitive was no longer considered to be a particularly dangerous menace to society. When a fugitive is removed from the list, another is added to take their place. As of November 3, 2021, there have been 526 fugitives on the list. Of the 526 fugitives listed, 490 have been located. That's a 93% find rate. With the advancement of technology came the ability to carry out different crimes. And different eras saw a distinct focus on the types of crimes being committed. This means that the profile of the fugitives on the list continually changes. In the 1950s, the list primarily consisted of bank robbers, burglars, and car thieves. Definitely going to require a lot more in order to make it on the list today. The list in the 60s reflected the revolutionaries of the times with destruction of government property, sabotage, and kidnapping. During the 1970s, a big focus for the FBI was cracking down on organized crime and terrorism. Thus, the list included a number of fugitives with ties to organized crime and terrorist groups. In the 1980s and 90s, the list contained predators, international terrorists, and traffickers. Today, you'll find all of the above along with crimes against children, white-collar crime, and gang violence. Similarly to the profile changes the list has seen over the years, the media outlets available for publicizing these fugitives has changed. Traditionally, it was magazines and newspapers that brought attention to America's fugitives. The very first 10 most wanted fugitive, Thomas Holden, was arrested after a citizen recognized his photograph in an Oregon newspaper. Gotta watch those newspapers. Televisions became common fixtures in homes during the 1950s, and shows like America's Most Wanted would come out in the late 80s. To date, 17 10 Most Wanted fugitives have been located as a direct result of tips provided by viewers of the show. That's actually a fantastic number, to know that just by sitting at home on the couch, you were doing a civil duty. For that, I salute you. And of course, today we have things like the internet, podcasts, and social media that are being used as avenues to attract public attention. Postings on the FBI's website has led to the apprehension of 3 of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. Fugitives have been apprehended in every state except Alaska, Maine, and Delaware. What do you think is up with that if you want to commit a crime? Just saying. Some interesting facts about the program. The first person to be placed on the list was Thomas James Holden, wanted for the murder of his wife, her brother, and her stepbrother. The shortest amount of time spent on the 10 most wanted fugitives list was 2 hours by Billy Austin Bryant in 1969. The longest amount of time spent on the 10 most wanted fugitives list was over 32 years by Victor Manuel Garina. The oldest person to be placed on the list is 80-year-old Eugene Palmer, who was added in May of 2019. There have been 10 women added, the first being Ruth, who was added in 1968 for kidnapping, extortion, and other crimes. 10 most wanted fugitive statistics. 1968 saw the highest number of fugitives located, with a total of 33. Take a look at the other years listed on the screen. Did you notice there were a handful of years in which no fugitives were located? I'd love to do a breakdown of some of the more notable fugitives on the list. Let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in seeing. Okay, now for the pop quiz. I told you there would be one. If you learned something from watching, give this video a like, and hey, while you're at it, consider subscribing to the channel.